Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neil Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Eleni Efstathiou this afternoon. She's joining us here as Section Chief of Genitourinary Medical Oncology at Houston Methodist Oncology Partners and as an investigator on the Phase 3 Magnitude study. She's going to be discussing some new data concerning that study that was presented at the American Society of Clinical Oncology's Genitourinary Cancer Symposium 2022. Welcome to Health Professional Radio. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Neil. It's a great pleasure. And, as the dust is settling down from what was a great GU ASCO meeting, and this time more live than virtual, we enjoyed, again, meeting all the investigators, but we also enjoyed a lot of great data. So, as you very well said, I'm one of the investigators of the Magnitude trial, and part of the steering committee of the trial. And I'm happy to share with you more information on what appears to be very, very interesting data.
Well, great. First off, give us a brief overview of the purpose of the trial and a little bit of the patient populations that were evaluated.
Absolutely. I think we're all very familiar with advanced prostate cancer. And what we do know is that once advanced prostate cancer stops responding to the initial hormonal manipulations that we have conventionally used, it becomes a more aggressive disease. The survival is more limited. But we also know that this cancer is also very highly heterogeneous. And in the past years, we have been very good about pursuing in a better way precision medicine in prostate cancer. What we had identified through initial collaborative studies is that there are in a subgroup of our patients who have reached that castration-resistant stage, 20 up to 25% of those men may harbor biomarker alterations that fall under the category of DNA damage response gene alterations. It appears that patients that harbor such mutations, either in the tumors or even worse, they have germline mutations, may have even a more poor prognosis. So it becomes important to understand whether we can target early on once the disease becomes castrate-resistant, such events, if found in the cancers, and in fact, in combination with enhanced androgen signaling inhibition. I know it sounds like a very long phrase, but essentially what we're trying to do is to move up earlier in the disease spectrum before the patient has been exposed to a lot of chemos and other treatments, this treatment option for the men who need it.
So how many patients were evaluated?
So let's go specifically to the study design. Now, we actually designed a study that was going to look at men who had failed initial treatment with conventional androgen signaling inhibition. They may have had received prior chemotherapy only in the hormone-naive setting, the very early disease setting. And we also would allow the introduction of a drug called abiraterone, very well known in the field, to be used up to 4 months prior. They had to have BRCA1 or 2 or other mutations. The number of patients that we included in the trial who harbored specifically these mutations were up to 400 patients. We did the screening for that early on. We also included a subset that was looking for a potential good signal even in men who didn't have these mutations. So 2 groups of patients, one with mutations, the other one without mutations. And then randomization in each group to receive abiraterone plus niraparib, the PARP inhibitor we used, versus abiraterone acetate alone. The endpoint of the trial, the primary endpoint, look at the radiographic progression-free survival, but try to be blinded and definitely by independent central review. That was key because, sometimes when you're the physician looking at the patient outcomes, that can be a little bit affected by not saying anything in a negative way, but, by personal beliefs, not as impartial as you would like. The blinded independent central review, definitely more impartial. And other secondary endpoints are super important: time to cytotoxic chemotherapy, time to symptom progression, and of course survival. And many, many others important considerations were included that are beyond the scope of our discussion, of course.
Did the results surprise you at all in any way? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
I would say the results do not surprise me. They were as expected, very smooth sailing. We actually, it's going to sound like a big number, but we pre-screened 3,370 patients, approximately, almost 3,400 patients, right? And then we were looking for these, mutations, whether they were present or not. And then about 1,000 of these patients entered into screening, and from those, 260 screen failed. So that drills down to the number that we were looking at, the 400 patients mainly who had the mutation. So for some people, that is surprising. Why so many? But that is the reality. You pre-screen a lot because you're looking for a subset of patients who really harbor these mutations. Yes, as I said as an aside, we were looking at just to get a signal. If those men who didn't harbor the mutations would get a response by this combination. So let's get to the results. The results really showed that indeed those men who harbored the mutation in the tumor, whether it was germline or somatic origin, did get a benefit from the combination. Whereas the other group that we just started just to get a glimpse, we stopped early on because in what we call a futility analysis, we didn't find a signal. That's what we expect when we're pursuing targeted precision medicine, right? To identify the subsets that really get the benefit. And that is what is not surprising about the trial. Very smooth sail, good tolerability. We're going to come to the adverse events because there are some, and we've got to be prepared for them, but something that we as physicians know how to handle and have experience with PARP inhibitors.
Talk about any future plans that stem from this particular clinical trial.
Yes, that's a great thought. First and more important, let's see, we're going to hear from the FDA what's going to be the approval status, how soon we will have available for our patients this combinatorial strategy. Other future plans, and of course ongoing right now, is to see, we've proven over and over again that the earlier you move up into the treatment regimen, a drug that is potent, the better outcomes you get. So that's the next step, right? We need to hear what happens earlier in metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer. And I'll be as bold and say, I hope that we will look even into high-risk localized disease, because there are men who harbor such mutations there, and they are younger, usually men. So a lot more data to be expected, but I think that at this point, the first and foremost is to get the paper out, to get everyone to review this data and become more comfortable with it, because there's always that big learning curve when you hear about a new combination, right?
Is there anything that you'd like to add?
I think that these are great times. We are making tremendous progress in new treatments in prostate cancer. Our patients are becoming more engaged and are very interested to be part of all this conversation. So our focus is to obviously have those robust data come out, but also be geared towards the quality of life that our patients need, and to have them as part of the conversations that we're having in the rooms where we're designing the trials. And trials like Magnitude actually represent that, because we look at quality of life, and a lot of other trials, of course, do that. So really happy to be a part of this trial and hope to contribute as much as possible in the future as well. And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and hopefully you'll return. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Eleni Efstathiou. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You could also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/healthprofessionalradio.